still works. But if you're draining inflammation out of your body, the person with the 4-inch pipe, they can get it, they can abuse their plumbing. Someone with an inch and a half pipe, let's say, different genetics, they have to be a lot more careful. And that's a lot of what my work ends up being is educating people, patients, one patient at a time about that idea. So you're right on the money, thinking of that. And there's something like 95% of your health are the choices you make in the environment that you're in. So genes matter, but for most of us, it's about 5% of the outcome.
Hi, I'm Tammy Ramsey with Beautiful Chaos. Today it's just me because I have a special guest who's just about to come on. So, my special guest today is Dr. Andrew Rosenberg. He is a visionary chiropractor, kinesiologist, I can't even say it, functional medicine pioneer, methylation researcher, author, and the director of Red Mountain Natural Medicine in Boise, Idaho. And he does telecalls, video calls, so you don't have to live in Boise. And I'm going to just share a little bit of my story, Dr. R, because you've kind of made a huge change in my, like, big difference in my life. I've been working with him since February, and I have gotten rid of some severe inflammation that I was having. I was in pain all the time. And I no longer have that unless I eat something that disagrees with my body, and then it lets me know immediately. So I have felt like this onion that we have just peeled back layer by layer, and I just keep getting healthier and keep getting feeling better. So I wanted to have you talk about some things that you've discovered along your path because I think this really hits home for me. My genes are horrible. Like if you look back in my family tree, everybody dies of heart disease and it's scary. So I want to talk about, are we our genes, or you know is there more to the story, and how does our environment and our food and our lifestyle affect our genes?
Well, thanks for the introduction, Tammy. And that's a good question. And I think it's something that a lot of us, not just the providers like myself, but a lot of just individuals, patients, people in our neighborhoods and in our country ask that question because it's important to make a distinction between, something you're born with, like blue eyes or a certain color hair. That's not something that we can change. But the rest of our genes, the other things that we think influence our health, they are definitely something that we can have a huge influence on. And so it's kind of like plumbing. Some people are born with a 4-inch pipe. Some people have an inch and a half diameter. There's still a pipe and it still works. But if you're draining inflammation out of your body, the person with the 4-inch pipe, they can get it, they can abuse their plumbing. Someone with an inch and a half pipe, let's say, different genetics, they have to be a lot more careful. And that's a lot of what my work ends up being is educating people, patients, one patient at a time about that idea. So you're right on the money, thinking of that. And there's something like 95% of your health are the choices you make in the environment that you're in. So genes matter, but for most of us, it's about 5% of the outcome.
Right. So I really feel like a lot of people don't realize how processed foods and being exposed to a lot of chemicals and things affect our bodies and affect what's happening because that's our environment, right? So that's the higher percentage of what's happening with us is what we're putting in our bodies and what we're doing with our bodies, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're aging ourselves now, but there was a guy on TV. He wasn't on TV when I grew up, but I knew who he was. His name was Jack LaLanne.
Yes.
And he was not just like a fit guy. He was like the world record holder in pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups. He was incredible. And he actually went to chiropractic college in the 1930s, graduated and went into fitness instead of becoming a clinician. But he said something that was really accurate. He said, if man made it, don't eat it. If God made it, it's good for you. And of course, there's details beyond that, but we have the worst food in the world. Um, that's just the way America is. I love my country. I'm not here to just be anti-American, but I mean, I got to call a spade a spade. We have the worst food in the world, and you are feeding your food is medicine. We hear that phrase. Well, it's true in the other way. Food can also be poison for you. And so when kids are growing up, I grew up on like Triscuits, Cheetos, Cheerios, Eggo waffles. I mean, all the stuff that's just, hey, these are good. Kids love them. Let's buy it. And that was great. There was like 6 ingredients on the bottle, on the package. But now, if you have grandkids and your granddaughters, or a parent like me in middle age, you go to the store and you buy those things. There's way more ingredients and other stuff in the food, but they don't even put on the label. So it's just a different. You have to be defensive to keep your genes healthy. But when if you have a family history of people dying in their 50s of heart disease, what's happening is like in they're eating for they're eating in a certain way that's promoting that's not honoring their genetics. Maybe they needed more vitamins, they needed to eat more of this type of food, fresh vegetables, leafy greens, and instead they were eating, to like I know families in my family, people I'm related to, it's like, they just put lard on bread.
Yeah.
And, because lard's not necessarily bad for you. I'm not saying get rid of beef tallow, but I'm saying like eating that for a snack for a few decades is probably going to shorten your life versus using it for some of the cooking. And so we do think about genetics and we think, well, everybody in my family has heart disease, so I'm going to get it too. That's not true. If you change your perspective and make adjustments and fix your deficiencies. So ultimately what ends up happening, Tammy, as your audience knows, when you're eating food that's not healthy for you, it's not delivering nutrition.
Right.
It's delivering calories. It's not delivering nutrition. And what happens is you have a stack of nutrients. You got your cellar, you got your pantry, your root cellar's full. Then you bring in fuel. And every time you burn a piece of fuel, it has to match to vitamins. So if you have low vitamins and high fuel, eventually you're out of vitamins and you're just left with calories and inflammation. So you try to flip it where what you eat is lower in calories, kind of what you did. You ate fewer calories but much higher nutrients, and that changes how your body behaves and changes your genetics. So it overcomes your genetic problems.
Right. So, and you talk about in your book, Your Genius Body, you talk about turning genes on and off. Is that the right, am I using the right terminology? Because I do have poor memory, but you talk about that I mean, our bodies are like so much smarter than we are, and they're doing all the right things. It's what we're doing to them that's causing a lot of our issues. So is it the nutritional things or lack of nutrition that turns on certain genes or genetics in our system, like cancer and heart disease and all of that? Is that
It is the way that our understanding of the science is basically that. I mean, when I say nutrition, that's a big category. It could be hundreds of thousands of different foods, but
right?
at the when you lift up the hood and you look at exactly what's going on, there's certain B vitamins. B9, that's kind of the key vitamin for this process we're talking about of turning genes on. And so what ends up happening is in certain families, they're born with a gene called MTHFR. Strange way to abbreviate it, but that's what it is. And when it does is it's in your body in an important location, like in the traffic of moving nutrition around, and it's like having a roadblock. And you can still get around it, but it slows down the traffic. So if you got to move a lot of molecules around, you got to make something because you got exposed to cigarette smoke, or you got exposed to mold, or somebody was painting when you were growing up and they were using the smelly paints that we no longer use.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you're trapped in that building. If you have this MTHFR gene, you're going to get bigger symptoms than the person sitting next to you that doesn't have that gene.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. All
And
right.
that gene is what produces SAMe. You've probably heard of I mean, most people have heard of
Yes.
SAMe. So it's like the production of SAMe is this magical molecule that is how our body makes things, builds things from scratch, and also turns things on and off. So let's say, for example, somebody got the chicken pox, right? Most of us I mean, the new generation, they don't get that life experience, but I certainly got the chicken pox.
Me too.
And so your body has this virus in every cell now, and it puts a little molecule on top of that gene to turn it off. So it's like you cover the gene with these these comes from folate, the carbon, the methyl group, you put it on top of the gene, and that gene turns off. So when you're making something, the body's reading the recipe, it skips over the section that says chickenpox. Of course, now it's going to be shingles. So
Shingles.
now you're stressed out, you're middle aged, you've got, a few decades of poor sleep, your kids kept you up, the dog keeps you up, you got a broken water pipe in the, whatever you're dealing with in life. And stress kind of compounds. And one day you wake up and you're like, my side, I've got a rash and it hurts. Well, you've got shingles now.
Yeah.
And that happened because you ran out of these vitamins over time. And when the body made a copy of that cell, it didn't have any extra vitamin to take the black marker and erase that section of instruction. So that's how it works. If you don't have enough of these vitamins, cancer genes get turned on, you get inflammation in your body that hurts your heart and leads to stroke. And so really at 30,000 feet, the value of understanding MTHFR, what I write a lot about in the book is it's like the most important biochemical process that if you get it right, like all these other things start working correctly. I mean, vitamin C is important, sure, zinc, yes, magnesium, but if you get MTHFR right, the benefits are enormous. But if you get it wrong, you got big problems in your family. People are going to die at 48 years old of a stroke. They're going to die of a heart attack at 52. It's not your genes, guys, it's your nutrition. So I was using the so in the case of like, shingles, what happens is people get stressed out and their nutrition's bad and it reactivates the chickenpox virus. Because every case of shingles I've ever seen in my family, patients, I had it one time. It's always a stressful period of life.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I know a lot of people that have had shingles. My husband, matter of fact, and he was the most painful thing he's ever had. So, and it was all stress induced.
We need more
So,
vitamins, Tammy, when we're stressed
yeah.
out, and not everybody knows that. So oftentimes when we're stressed, we go eat potato chips and drink the Mountain Dew, and we kind of try to deal with stress to with junk food, and that kind of makes it worse.
Right. All those comfort foods. We go for those comfort carbs, which are really, really bad for us. And so a lot of the things that we worked on, I'm throwing this out there before we move on to our next question, but a lot of the things that we worked on was eating, like I went from eating certain vegetables, which there was a lot of vegetables that I didn't know I don't do well with, which was funny to me because I thought I was eating all the right things. I thought I was eating healthy. I was eating a lot of almonds and nuts and carrots and beets and kale. And then I had all these oxalates and too many oxalates. And I was actually overkilling on a lot of things and it was causing issues. So there's that too. But I'm really appreciative for you and all of your terminology and ease that you speak because you always put things in like layman terms that like totally make sense and I totally appreciate that when
Sure.
you're working with me. So on that note, like I wish that people would just could understand a little more what nutritional food looks like. Like you said, if it comes from God, you're good. If it comes from man, like that was
Jack LaLanne,
Jack
yeah.
LaLanne. I think that's beautiful because, avoiding processed foods for me has been huge. That's been a really helpful thing to get myself straight. And that was all you telling me to do that. So in your book, you talk about phenotypes. And I don't think you and I have not talked about that. I don't understand. So what is the importance of knowing your phenotype?
So
You
this is a good question, Tammy, and basically, I'm using a little bit of poetic license to. I'm not going to say invent a term, but to give it maybe a different meaning than you're going to see if you go be like a PhD geneticist. But here's how it's applicable to our lives and your audience. So a genotype is looking at one gene. You take your little, microscope and you look at one gene, but there's hundreds, thousands of them.
Right.
So a phenotype is your expression of the gene affecting your health over time. So if I use diabetes as an example, diabetes is a phenotype. It's kind of looking at genetics plus a bunch of environment and choices over time. And so if somebody has getting their, if, heaven forbid, they have uncontrolled diabetes, they're having their leg amputated tomorrow. I mean, it's like Civil War medicine. It's brutal. Okay, it's brutal. But that's a really extreme phenotype of genes that have been not turned on correctly and really bad maybe choices or bad advice, whatever's led them into that situation. Somebody else maybe just be in pre-diabetes mode and they're finally figuring out that they're on that road and they want to go the other way. And so they have a really mild phenotype. So that's what phenotype really means. It's kind of like it's not quite the same as diagnosis, but it's like what does the health problem look like? And you're trying to take into account the environment and the genetics. And then there's within a different with every phenotype that you have, like there's let's say there's like a I use diabetes, there's a cardiovascular heart disease type phenotype where because of their genetics, they just don't process cholesterol as fastly, or excuse me, as quickly. And if they eat the carnivore diet, for example, they have dangerously crazy high levels of cholesterol. Not everybody will. Not some people will eat carnivore and lower their cholesterol, but if you have a
That's me.
yeah, if you have a unique phenotype that says you got to be a little more careful with the animal fats, then you just shift over on the scale to olive oil and avocado oil and a little lighter, a little healthier, still organic, still fresh. But that's kind of what phenotype means. Like, what's your diagnosis? Tells us what the health problem is, but it's really genes plus the environment. So that's you can rescue the phenotype, Tammy. That's what we mean. That's what I talk about in the book. So if you take somebody with fatty liver, they got high enzymes, you can work on that in a couple of years. Your phenotype of fatty liver can be gone. You have the same genes, but they've been optimized, and now the fat in the liver on the ultrasound's gone, and so you've rescued that person.
So you rescued me because I'm gonna tell y'all I share my medical because I'm that kind of gal. But I had a fatty liver when I first started going to him, and I no longer have a fatty liver, and it's only been 7 months. So I am just tickled pink, and that's why I have you on here because I want to share what you know so that you can share with everybody else. I would love the world to be healthy and happy. The next question that I kind of wanted to talk about was it seems like, and even in your book, you talk about that the stomach is normally your first focus when you're working with somebody because, well, it's like when you asked me, I'd had my gallbladder out and you said, well, why? And I said, well, I don't know why it had, full of stuff. And you said, well, why was it full of stuff? And I went, wow, nobody ever asked me that before. And you're like, well, something wasn't processing correctly before it went in there is what I'm remembering. If I'm wrong,
Yeah.
tell me. But so you knew right away I had a stomach problem. Plus, I'd been on Prilosec for like 30 years, and you have turned my stomach on. Like I can eat things that I couldn't eat before without pain. I haven't had heartburn since we've started this adventure together.
It's wonderful.
So yeah, talk about what is that normal? Do you normally look at, or is everybody just kind of different?
So if everybody was different, here's what I'll speak from my, kind of like coaching hat, doctor hat on. If everybody walked in and was brand new, the visits would need to be 3 hours long and it would be really intense, a lot more expensive. And I'm not saying this to be, facetious or whatever, but there's, in the fabric of the universe, there's an 80/20 rule.
Yeah.
20% of your farm equipment gets 80% of the use. 20% of the tools in your toolbox gets 80% of the use. 20% of what I know solves 80% of the problems that walk in. And that's such an important thing to remember. And I'm sure whoever's listening, whatever career they have, they're like, yep, same thing in my line of work. And
Yeah.
that's just reality. And so you have to appreciate the idea. We back up. Nutrition, food is medicine.
Right.
Okay, well, I would say like an asterisk at the end of that. And I would say the disclaimer is that's only true if you can even digest what you put in your mouth.
Yes.
And just because you swallow it and chew for 20 seconds and wash it down with a beverage, that doesn't mean it's inside your body. It's just going in your esophagus. I mean, what happens next? So we do start with the stomach, and it's so important. And that is kind of like that is a perspective that I take with every patient. Now, I do occasionally meet patients who've like been around the functional medicine circuit. They've seen six, seven, 10 other people, and they show up and they're like, none of that worked. And then I'll put them on my table and I'll figure out that their tongue is half as long as it should be, and they can't breathe at night.
Oh,
And because they can't breathe, they're just chronically ill. And then we go send them and they get their tongue fixed and it changes their life. So it's like there's always somebody outside of that. But yes, Tammy, you're exactly right. The stomach is just, think about it like this. Um, when we're under stress, automatically, automatically, this could be playing a long football game. This could be on a big adventure in the mountains. It could be any sport, any work related issue, anything, traveling, doesn't matter what the stress is. Your body always stops circulation into your stomach when you're stressed out. So I look at people, I'm like, you live in
oh,
America, you live in the modern world, you're in pain, you're tired, you're frustrated, you're angry, you maybe feel hopeless. It's like that's a lot of stress right there. I'm like, I bet your stomach doesn't work the right way. And then you're like, oh, by the way, I've been on a medication that lowers my stomach acid for 30 years. I'm like, well, there's no, of course, we have to start there.
yeah.
So,
I love that. I thought that was very crucial in my life for sure. So I'm very appreciative of that. So what about so I mentioned oxalates earlier
yeah.
because I didn't know that, almonds and carrots and kale and a lot of these things that are healthy for us, beets, contain high oxalates. And you think you're doing all the right things. You think you're eating all this food that's healthy, but I guess I was overloading. So how do oxalates affect our bodies? Like what's the story with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that we're not all very aware of. This isn't like something you learn in school. This is like advanced functional medicine stuff, but you realize pretty quickly after I've tested thousands of patients, oxalate problems are really common. And ironically, what happens is when we have a really healthy gallbladder and it makes a lot of bile, it comes out at the right time, that sort of sequence that happens in our intestines, that prevents us from absorbing the oxalates from these healthy foods. So I would be really incorrect if I said kale wasn't healthy or spinach or Swiss chard or, you know, almonds. But the problem is not how healthy is the food. It's kind of like, is there anything else in the food that we might not tolerate? And the devil's in the details a little bit. So that's what oxalates are about, compounds in plants that the plants use for
Mhm.
their own self-defense. So if you're a grasshopper and you're going to go eat the leaf of a plant or dig into the fruit and it's full of oxalate, you get a stomach ache, so you leave that plant alone. And that's one of the strategies the plants use. So when we eat those foods, if we pressure cook or we do a big like soup or stew, or you really cook it in the oven at high heat, you're going to degrade a lot of the oxalates out of that food. Like beets that are shaved and raw probably have a lot more, well, they will, like raw carrots, versus if you steamed the carrots or did pressure cooking with the beets or something, you would end up with less oxalate in the finished food. But oxalate problems, very common. They disrupt our mineral balance. They make changes to, they create kind of like problems with anemias and other electrolytes like magnesium, potassium, things that are positively charged get disrupted in our body. But at the end of the day, it's one of the main indicators for gallbladder dysfunction. So we know that people who've had that gallbladder dysfunction, maybe had it taken out, and haven't yet restored everything and done the work, that when they eat those foods, they're going to absorb way too much of the oxalate. And that actually, yeah, it can cause joint pain. It causes kidney stones. I'm sorry, it's like that doesn't sound fun.
No,
And
that's
one thing on
painful.
this, one interesting thing on this, Tammy, the oxalate question is they looked back like into Europe. If you ever go to like Switzerland, which I haven't been there, but I know they eat this food where it's like they pickle vegetables
Mhm.
like you talked about, carrots and beets and root vegetables with lots of oxalates, but they always eat it with like their cheese. So when you eat dairy with when you have food with high calcium, and food with high oxalate, the toxicity of the oxalate is lowered.
Oh,
Because as you know in the book, and I think when we work together, one of the recommendations we give for oxalate problems is we have people take calcium before they eat, and that begins to stop that begins to solve the oxalate problem. So that's just one of those cultural things. If someone back in the day must have figured out that eating some Emmentaler or Swiss cheese with your root vegetables actually is a good combination of food. So
yeah.
something to think about.
Well, and the cooking of the foods too, because like I was eating a lot of raw foods, and that was what was really getting to me
Hey,
was that.
everybody says raw food has more nutrition. Why would it be? How could it possibly be bad for us?
Well, when you don't have a gallbladder, obviously that's the key, right? So, also, let's see. You wrote, if changing our environment to increase our body's methyl donors can prevent and reverse damage caused by fatty liver, just imagine what else it could do. Can you explain or expand on this idea?
Sure.
And
So you mentioned something earlier about families that have a history of having cardiovascular disease at a devastatingly young age.
yes.
And what that basically what happens in these cases is the supply of methyl groups in our diet. So it comes from foliage. B9 is folate, and that sounds a lot like the word foliage because it was discovered in the leaf of a spinach plant. Okay.
Okay.
So I learned recently that during summer, when the UV light is really strong, it actually, penetrates your skin and it actually destroys your B9 levels a little bit. So you got vitamins going through your blood, and when the sun hits it, some of them are destroyed by sunlight, some are improved by sunlight. But nature produces foliage when the sun is up and hot and high. And so when you're eating fresh vegetables from your garden, you're getting the dose of the B9 that you're supposed to get, even though the sunlight is affecting it. But when we get this B9 methylation cycle correct, what it does is it makes us detoxify correctly. So it helps a woman process estrogen. If women become estrogen dominant, there's lots of problems associated with that, heavy cycles, clotting, pain. There's PMDD issues. We've got our wives and our, you know, family members and our community members, they're not getting great solution because the solution is usually like go take birth control or something. I'm like, that just makes it worse. It's more estrogen. That's
Yeah.
not the answer.
Yeah.
Um, but MTHFR has a big influence on hormone detox, so that's a big one, estrogen in women and healthy testosterone levels in men. It has a huge influence on neurotransmitters. So one of the big things I look for in practice, this is an ongoing, almost daily thing. I had a patient in earlier today who we had discovered a couple weeks ago. He's very athletic, super kind of a mutant guy. I mean, it's a good way. He's a beast, and he's always training, doing high level athletic stuff. But he's not eating enough tyrosine and not eating enough folate. So his dopamine levels and adrenaline levels are dropping too low. It's affecting his mood and causing body pain and stuff. And so we identified that. We gave him tyrosine, which is an amino acid. We gave him methylated B9 with some other B vitamins. And, he comes back in and he's like, man, that was awesome. When you need this stuff, it's like almost instantaneous. So the people who have low dopamine, who are grumpy old men kind of person, the curmudgeon person with cravings, person who gets hangry, person who gets sleepy, they take naps all the time, they sleep in the car, they sleep at the party, they sleep at Christmas parties, they go to bed, they close their eyes, and 30 seconds later they're asleep, and their wife is pissed off because she's taking half an hour and the husband falls asleep immediately. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Not fair. So those are situations where people benefit from methylation support. Okay. And
Okay.
when we talk about cardiovascular disease, there's one molecule that we should be testing on ourselves. If you're not testing it already, you should test it. It's called homocysteine. And it's just this indicator that tells you it's kind of like a bellwether of your methylation cycle. So the optimum range is 5 to 8, and oftentimes it comes in at 11, 12, 15, 17.
Oh, wow.
So if you have someone with the family history of heart disease, and Uncle Bob died at 52, my grandfather at 56, my dad at 58, well, or 48 or whatever, you need to test your homocysteine. And if it's above 8, you need to take more methyl groups.
Okay.
And this goes back to our food conversation. We don't eat enough methyl groups. Now we live in the inside of a continent. If we were eating shrimp and grass-fed beef and lots of really good, rich, fresh vegetables all the time, which I admit we probably all don't eat enough, then we would be okay, Tammy.
Yeah.
Like if I want to mention one thing about the country of Italy, and I haven't been there in person, but we all know where it is. They have the highest percentage of MTHFR genes of any country in the world. So more people walking down a random street in Italy, if you tested them, will have a copy of MTHFR than anywhere else. And it's interesting. It's like, well, is that a defect? Is there something wrong with them? Well, the way it works is think about food. Where do you think, what do most people say is like the greatest food in the world? It would probably be Italy, maybe Greece, Spain, but Italy's probably top of the list.
Yeah.
So their diet is so high in foods that have vitamin B9 that it doesn't matter if you have the gene.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Well, plus I really feel like they're all about the cooking with fresh and
Exactly.
all fresh ingredients. And so, yeah, there's,
Imagine growing up in like cold, frozen northern Germany and there's no fresh food for like 8 months.
yeah,
And then you've got people in Italy who are eating fresh herbs off of their windowsill 365
every
days out of the
day.
year. You
Yeah,
see it?
every
Yeah, it's
day.
like, come on, it's not a fair comparison.
So, where can people learn more about your book and your work? Like I know you've got a book, it's Your Genius Body, and then you're on YouTube, and your YouTube is Beyond MTHFR,
That's
correct?
right. That's right. I've kind of been a member of the Overachievers Anonymous group for a while. And I need to kind of put all these brands together to make it easier for people. But the book's on Amazon, so just where you buy everything else, you can get a Kindle version or you can get the paperback. The YouTube channel you mentioned, there's a website that goes along with the YouTube channel. If you're really interested in this and you want to do a bigger, more deep dives and get more data, the blog on Beyond MTHFR is broken out into really, kind of shorter articles. The book is kind of the total package though. It's got all the ideas in there. And I probably should have written 6 books instead of putting it all into one, as you know. Um, but I was so excited. I was like, well, I may never have time to do this again. I better just put it all that I give it everything I've got and see what happens. Um, but yeah, so those are that's so far has kind of been my life's work at this point, trying to get that information out there. It's led me to have a really unique practice. I've had patients from 46 countries or excuse me, 46 states, 14 different countries. Um, that's been really interesting because anybody who speaks English is like out there asking these questions like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting better? Why am I not healthy?
Yeah.
Why is what these other doctors have done not been successful? And eventually, if you keep asking those questions, you'll eventually land on MTHFR, and then you'll be like, okay. Um, who do I need to talk to about that? So that's if anybody out there is looking for help and guidance on this issue, we have a really good process for connecting with patients really anywhere in the world. I have patients in India we work with right now. It works really well. A little bit of a time zone challenge, but that's where you find me. And then of course my clinic website is redmountainclinic.com. So that'll get you in the right direction.
Yep. And you can go and visit him. I went visiting for my first visit, and then I've done phone calls and videos since. And that worked great for me. I have some people that I've referred to you that have just done video, and they're just as happy with you. So thank you for taking time with us and for sharing your great wisdom. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for working this little onion and peeling all the layers back and continuing to help me to get healthy.
You're absolutely 100% welcome, Tammy. And I'll say that, getting better is the drug that everybody that I work with is after, including me. So when you get better and you glow and you have that wonderful vitality, it's just kind of more proof of concept, and that just makes us want to wake up tomorrow and do it again. So
There you go. Well, good. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day. And I'll probably be talking to you in a few weeks.
Sounds good, Tammy.
All
Thanks
right.
for the invite. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Take care. Bye.